Happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room episode number 363 on November 12th, 2025. I am Jason Eifer. I am the Executive Director of Montana Digital Academy, and tonight I'm joining you from fabulous North Central Montana in my hometown of Great Falls, Montana. And joining me tonight, as always, good evening, Dr. Westfryer. Joining us tonight from Charlotte, North Carolina. How are you tonight, sir?
Good evening, Jason. I am doing well, trying to adjust my lighting here because I got new glasses and I haven't had them for like 6 months. But I am teaching middle school media literacy here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we had a small taste of winter with just a dip below freezing. But now we're back in the mid 60s today. So it's been a lovely fall, and we've kind of just peaked out with our leaves. So we have really been enjoying our weather here, and student conferences the next couple of days, and then a week, and then it's Thanksgiving. So the semester is quickly going to wind down on us.
Yeah, and the weather's been actually very beautiful here. A little bit of rain, but a lot of really nice days. And the great thing about North Central Montana is that we get what's called the Chinook winds. They're warm winds that blow down from the north, and they can lead to some beautiful days in the dead of winter. And one of the things that I really miss about living in Great Falls is that you would get these 3 or 4 days in the middle of February where it would be upper 60s in the middle of a harsh winter, and it's something I really miss. Missoula is very socked in, and it gets very gray there, and you feel it after a little while. And in fact, when I lived in Helena, it was bitter cold there, but the sun was always out, and so you get the sunlight, which as I have found out is critical for human health. So it's nice to be here, and it's supposed to be 70 here on Friday, and so we're really
wow, good.
Yeah,
it's gracious.
Yeah, 70 for November in Great Falls is pretty darn good.
I do have to ask before we go, I notice, and careful watchers, if you're tuning into the show on video, we've got the triple double dot. So it's like the double hamburger between Montana and AI Centris. So a new look for Dr. Neifert tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
I like to keep things, different for you, Wes. So just keep you guessing. So go from there. So, I would like to think that this show is 60 minutes of rando banter, but I think we have a mission here. What's our job tonight?
We are going to illuminate the world of educational AI so that you will leave tonight without any questions and with everything answered, because Jason will be able to clarify it all for you. That's my new summary.
Well, that's a bold claim. So I think we've got some links to go through, right?
We do. So tonight you can go, as always, to our show notes on edtechsr.com/links. We are updated now after months and months of not being, thanks to Substack and some help from our AI algorithmic friends. But we're going to talk about AI with OpenAI and Google articles. We've got a few other sundry AI-related articles, some security, some social media, my favorite, the miscellaneous category, and Geeks of the Week, which I probably should just choose one of them, but I put a lot of them down. So
yeah, I like you always bring 3. I think that's part of the Dr. Fryer charm. So
okay, all right. Well, if you can feel free to dissuade me of that and just say it's the Geek of the Week, not the Geeks of the Week.
Well, we are the Geeks of the Week, aren't we?
That's right. There you go.
Dr. Fryer, my thanks to you for doing most of the links this week. I think that you should take the honor of deciding where we start first.
Sure. All right. Well, hey, let's start with some new news from today. So this is Ars Technica, and this regards some privacy and lawsuit issues. So the headline is OpenAI slams court order that lets New York Times read 20 million complete user chats. And the gist of the article is that OpenAI, wants to protect user privacy. So they claim it's also going to be quite revealing to see that raw data. And this is one of the things that we'll hear people talk about and advocate for with regard to social media, which of course those algorithms have machine learning and AI baked in now as well, that if you can't have visibility into the algorithms, it's so difficult to think about researching and really understanding what's going on, or potentially regulating. So I think that this is very positive, and it's going to be very illuminating because 20 20 million chats. Of course, I'm sure that the New York Times folks will be using AI to parse and summarize said tools. But yeah, I think this is going to be good. And I haven't read. I don't know if you have any predictions of how long these lawsuits are going to take. I know when I listen to the Hard Fork podcast and hear their disclaimers, and Kevin Roos works for the New York Times, which is having a lawsuit, I always hear that, and I know that's ongoing. So, but yeah, what do you think? Should we be upset that the judge is releasing all these chat conversations? Because honestly, that if it's not, I mean, if they're not anonymized, I guess that could be a surprise to people if they were thinking that they were having a private conversation.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, like it's clear that and I don't want to aim this in any particular large language model, because I think that there was a lot of shenanigans around many of the development of these large language models. I can't remember if we talked about this or not, but the author of Empire of AI, which is a book that's been talked a lot about on the Twit Network and Inside AI, which is a podcast that I listen to frequently enough that I'm actually an executive producer because I give them $20 a month on Patreon, and I believe they've also talked about the book on Hard Fork as well. And I really want to get the author names right because the book is
Karen Howe.
Thank you. And first of all, she's an amazing interviewee. Like I really like listening to her walk through it. And I've listened to about a third of the book on audio, and then I bought a copy of it as well. But one of the things that she's talked about in a couple of the podcasts is that one of the things that is kind of up in the air a little bit is whether or not it requires all of these materials, all of the compute power to build effective large language models or effective AI models that do these generative pieces. And what's going on right now in China is a good example of this. DeepSeek was really stunning to the bigger development of large language models because they were able to do things much more cheaply than what Meta has done with Llama or OpenAI or even Claude. But it's going to be a while, I think, before we parse through this. And part of it's because we have long-time copyright law in the United States, of which has been shifting dramatically over the last 100 years towards the creator, right? And we could have a debate about that. And certainly the open culture folks have put out arguments for years that our copyright law is already way too restrictive and also lasts way too long. It was designed to be less than 2 decades when it started in the original copyright law in the United States. And I seem to have lost Dr. Fryer. So I'm going to keep up. There he is.
I just maximized you. I'm sorry. I'm seeing these buttons and I'm tempted because we have our new little display that we'll talk about. Sorry.
Ooh, toys. Yeah, I'm the same way too. I swear I had one of those things in my crib when I was a kid with all the like Fisher Price buttons on it.
Oh yeah, your parents set you up for success.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So look where I am now. There's just a lot in this, right? But it took years for streaming music to figure out what copyright looked like. It took years. In fact, there's still a lot of lawsuits over digital rights for things like commercials. If you use a lot of streaming services, in fact, the streaming services that are dominated by the free providers. I'm thinking of things like Google Free Play TV and those types of services. A lot of those commercials, they don't have streaming rights for, so it just goes to a blank screen for 30 seconds or we'll be back in a minute. So it is complex. And I hope that, and I want this to be adjudicated, right? And I, certainly have opinions about this of where I perceive it going, but these technologies are moving so fast that, we need to get to some clarity about this. So like we've talked about in the past, earlier this year when courts ruled in California, I think they were California federal courts had ruled on a couple of cases in the same week. And I believe it was either the same judge or the judge right next door to the other judge actually released directly conflicting rulings, because it's really complex. And so almost certainly these issues end up in front of the Supreme Court, and the legal liability for this stuff will continue to weigh very heavily on the discussions about generative AI.
It was interesting, right, that Anthropic did a settlement with a lot of authors in the last couple months, and I think it only worked out that you got a few $100 or something like that. It wasn't much, but it was a settlement and a payment, and I think it's fascinating. We could go ahead. I can go ahead and do this one too, because it's related to AI, and I'll be interested how this strikes you. I don't know if you saw this, but our buddy Miguel Gulen, who works for TCA, and he wrote this for the tech notes for TCA, wrote this article, "Can I upload that? AI copyright and our classrooms?" And I had a recent conversation with a K-12 administrator that was talking about, lots of concerns about this, about what teachers are doing, and are they violating licenses and copyright and putting the institution at risk, and things like that. So it very much still is a wild west, and institutions, of course, want to protect themselves and be concerned about liability. I think Miguel's main point in this is to be aware that licenses do apply, and you could potentially violate copyright as a teacher if you're uploading an entire work without permission. I'm going to say, though, I bet it's a bit naive to think that you, teacher Fryer in North Carolina, might be the first person to ever upload, Animal Farm to, ChatGPT. I think that these large language models have ingested, an incredible amount of content. And again, it's interesting that we don't have that kind of visibility into the platform, right? I know that makes me think a little bit of content ID. I think with YouTube, I think there is a way to go to some pages and say, hey, I've got this song in the background. What does content ID say about this? Has the artist and the copyright holder allowed that to be used? I know that I don't know, oftentimes I usually just use a copyrighted, Creative Commons thing or something like that I put online. But it would be extremely interesting to know, for instance, hey, have you already ingested a copy of my textbook or a copy of our novel or whatever like that? So, any thoughts about that? And are you all doing anything with that in terms of your faculty and instructors with the Montana Digital Academy?
We do have this discussion a lot, and we've been, one thing for sure we do is that we don't use any resource with AI unless we have a physical copy of the book sitting in the office. And the reason why we do that is because the bottom line for us is that seems to be the standard that is being enforced right now in lower court decisions, right? Like the Anthropic decision said that it was fair use to be able to ingest those materials. It was not fair use when they acquired them through piracy, right? So obviously that's going to absolutely be a minimum standard. And I'm not entirely sure I agree with the conclusion. There's an interesting line here that that by summarizing an article, that's republishing it, right? Which is what what would be a clear violation of copyright law. And now I come to the same conclusion as our buddy that user beware, and that we want to be extra careful about this. But it'll be very interesting and kind of bizarre if where the courts come down is that we as end users can't take a book that we've purchased or an article we have a legal right to and not use an AI tool. Now, it's different if you are republishing those pieces for sure, right? But I've talked a lot about that one of the great powers of AI is the fact that you can take a book, an article, a YouTube video, all sorts of different resources, and make that like a co-intelligent conversant, right? And so, if you don't have any expertise in, say, psychometrician studies. So in other words, you don't know how to do or write, clean, scholarly multiple choice questions, then you can upload a book on psychometrics or test generation or item generation, and then assuming you have a license to use it, and uh, and ask questions of it, have it help you process something, right? And if it gets to a point where that's just not allowed for something that you've purchased or legally obtained, that seems like a bizarre result. But also, it just highlights the extraordinary cracks in our licensing regime, right? And the fact that we're nearly 30 years into the internet era, and in a lot of cases we still don't have really clear guidelines on what you can use internet wise, or there's still a lot of folks in the education that industry that perceive that fair use is anything online is usable, which of course it's very much not, based on our copyright law. And there's even a discussion on whether or not things that have been open source with a Creative Commons license, whether you can use that for ingestion or not. There's a healthy debate about that too. For example, if it has a non-commercial designation to it and a for-profit model is using it to train, is that commercial use? And there's strong opinions about that one as well. But new technology does what new technology does, which is transform our understanding of things like the law.
And I would say that, as probably you and I have talked about for years, helping educators and students have a better understanding of fair use, and not just the 1986 fair use guidelines for educational media that did these bright line 30 seconds or less and whatever, but like, it actually depends upon the use. What are you doing? Are you transforming it? Does it have an impact on the commercial value? And so I would say that there's a lot of options here. We've seen Adobe, I think, with Firefly, and I know you're much more versed in this than I, really make a big deal about their training data and talking about how their generative platform is not going to be using pirated materials. So we could have the court rule in with respect to that. We also could potentially have some regulation that is going to limit the amount of training that the platforms can do on our data and what we upload. So like right now, I have the memory definitely turned on with ChatGPT. I don't know if Gemini has a similar kind of thing, but like I do enjoy and want it to know things that I've done in the past and to iteratively improve. But theoretically, the platforms could have a really firm, like, no, we are not keeping these chats, we're not keeping your materials, we're not learning, and our model's not getting better based on what you put into the model. We've also got the possibility of running local models. I know you've done a lot of experimenting with that on your laptop and devices that are not like supercomputers. These are consumer level machines, but like M1 and better machines have pretty awesome processors, and so do the smartphones. And so being able to run a local model is something else, because then it doesn't go up to the cloud. It's just staying on your device. And I've got a link in here. You've probably done that. I just saw Notebook LM for students tonight. I've got a Google article we can talk about a little bit later, but it has some great links to some different things that Google has been doing with AI. And of course, I've known you could do these things, but it's just notebooklm.google/students. And so it's explicitly saying, create study materials, upload your sources, level up your studying, create a mind map. And I did this for the first time last week. I made a video overview, not just an audio summary, but you have audio overviews, video summaries, flashcards, quizzes, AI suggested reports, Q&A, a learning guide. It's freaking mind-blowing. But what I will say, what's odd is if you don't have clear guidelines from your own tech department, which I think probably a lot of folks may not, I mean, it really is a wild west out there, and especially with regard to student use, right? There's one thing for us as teachers and adults to, whether we're using a school account or we may just use our personal account, to go out there and use materials and use these AI tools. But I'm certainly wanting to do more with my students. I've mentioned Flint AI before. Canva has now had some phenomenal updates. In fact, I didn't put that in here, but I've got my web design kids right now exploring the hour and a half keynote that they have for these 7 new, big time features. And one of them is enhancements to their AI capability. So I think there's a multitude of directions that this can take. And of course, this is only law in the United States. And that's one of the interesting things about copyright. And I think it was Orwell, his works were like either in copyright in the United States and out of it in Australia, or vice versa. And so, the Internet Archive would have servers in one country that it could legally, share those in full because they were out of copyright, but in the other country they weren't. And so you've got these discrepancies, and with a global, interconnected global village we live in, it makes copyright pretty interesting, since that is it varies country to country.
Yeah, absolutely. And that also, I mean, there's so many ways in which we really haven't dealt with the global nature of our economy. But that's a wonderful example because, in fact, there are countries that have vastly shorter copyright laws, and there are some countries that have vastly so understated copyright laws that actually copyright lasts a lot longer there than it does in other countries because they haven't developed it further. So we're going to have to figure out, answers to this. But I'm looking forward to the legal clarity. And I remember something that was talked about in Hard Fork a couple of years ago, which is, it was an attorney from Harvard Law, I think, but she just said, there's no way that this becomes, unsolvable, because we legally solved. I don't think that we've economically solved, but we legally solved copyright claims, for streaming. So, obviously there's an end game here at some point, but I'd imagine it's decently down the road still.
Yeah. All right. Well, where would you like to go next, sir?
Well, I kind of want to hear about, because I did not hear the new announcements for Google in the last day or two. So I was hoping that you would go through those.
Okay. So I think, let's see, that one might be yours, the Gemini AI agent.
It is, yeah. And
I'll do the vibe coding one. Now, I need to play more with this tool. I have talked on the show in my little website, ai.westfire.com. I keep on basically putting links to the AI specific posts and things. But this is from Geeky Gadgets, geekygadgets.com. I'm sure that's everyone's favorite website. From November 7th, Google's new AI Studio vibe coding push, create full stack apps in a weekend. I think I've shared this suspicion before, but I think that Google may have been holding back a little bit with its AI capabilities, in part because of some lawsuits and the fact that they're not like the dominant player. And so I think that Google is now gone ahead and just pushed the accelerator. I don't know if it's to the floor, but they've really released a lot more of their potential. Remember, this is the group that brought us DeepMind and mapped every protein in the human body, or the human in humans. So AI Studio focuses on vibe coding. It is trying to really empower developers that don't have the coding expertise to create, to create with code interactive apps and do it in a visually engaging way. Of course, it uses Gemini, but it has image generation, speech synthesis, text to speech synthesis, and so it has a monitoring dashboard, predefined templates, and it says tools for full stack development. And I have a GitHub, and that's been fun to basically share my GitHub projects. Not that I think anybody's really going to, maybe use them all, but it's cool to be able to share them in this way. And I have 7 different ones. The last one I did was using Firebase, which I actually have a student. I didn't talk about this because I think I did this since our last show. I had a student last year creating with vibe coding. He was using Copilot. his own expiring chat app that he could use with friends at school and away from school. But he was using Firebase as his database. And so anyway, I ended up doing this primarily with ChatGPT, but with some Gemini. And basically, it's not a true relational database. It's like a flat database, but it's super cool. And it was it's amazing because Google Sites is not highly interactive. And so the one that I posted on my blog was about doing this for a chapter that we had for our Sunday school class. And so I called it Google Sites Comment Magic. I'm getting Geek of the Weekend extra early. But anyway, that was a vibe coded project, and it was using Firebase. And so now it's even more powerful with this specific AI studio that Google has created. Have you played with the vibe coding stuff much lately?
I have a little bit, but part of the problem I run into is that, and you see this a lot discussed on Reddit in vibe coding subreddits, but I don't know how to fix stuff that breaks. Yeah. And so, and because I haven't really coded. I mean, I guess I know a little HTML, I know a little PHP, I know a little bit of the language that all the programmers love.
C++, Python.
The more modern Python is the answer. So yeah, Python, I know a little bit of Python, just enough to be dangerous. And I've actually thought about, we're way too busy right now with the new lab to do this, but we thought about maybe as some folks in our organization working through a Coursera course or something on Python. In fact, Google has a couple of wonderful Python courses. But we thought about working through those as a group because it is there's a lot of good use of Python in AI apps. But it's cool, and I built a Chrome extension a couple of months ago. Weekend project, took me less than 30 minutes, and it worked for a couple of weeks and then broke again. And it was pretty amazing. And I also think, and I love that you're doing this with students, because I think that it's likely to be a part of the developer stack for sure in the future. And more importantly, I think it can really help programming be more approachable to kids.
Yeah. So I haven't applied for this, but this is, to be clear, just a contract position. This would be an after hours sort of thing. There's a vibe coding online edX course instructor position with our local Davidson college that actually my wife found that, and I haven't thrown my name in the hat for that, but I have considered that. And I teach middle school computer programming. So, and last semester I did teach some AP classes, but I am not ready to go teach a full blown, let's code in Java or Python or anything else in high school. I don't have that expertise in that background. But what I do have is a pretty extensive background in developing a variety of different solutions for the web. And an example of where expertise kind of comes in, when I was vibe coding that Firebase Google Sites Comment Magic, it allowed me initially to just have a password because I wanted an admin password so I could moderate comments and I could delete them. And it was just actually in the HTML file. These is pretty simple. It's a single JavaScript HTML file. There's not any, but in that case, it did talk to this Firebase backend. But anyway, I had to point out, I said, isn't that a pretty big security vulnerability? Shouldn't we have a way to conceal that admin password? Oh, yeah, you're right, Wes. And so it's now in the, is that a Google script? I think that one may be in a Google script. So anyway, it's on the web page. But no, it's in the configuration for Firebase. So it's not out there in the clear. But, folks that are pointing out that, it's pretty easy, yes, to make apps, but it's also pretty easy to make things that are insecure or things that'll break or things that will compromise people's privacy and allow you to be hacked and all kinds of things. So I don't think that coders their jobs are going away. I don't think lawyers are going away either. But I definitely, absolutely believe that these tools are changing the game. And, you can go to my GitHub right now and see the 7 projects that I've done, and they all work. Like I use them all. I don't use them all every day, but with Creative Commons, when they came out with the 4.0 licensing, the tools that I was using to get my attribution links weren't working. So I vibe coded my own solution that I run off of my website. It's westfryer.com/cc, and you can put your own little, Flickr image that's Creative Commons licensed, and it'll generate a nice little attribution for you. So.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that's also true when we talk about coding is that I do very strongly believe that prompting is a form of coding. And especially since it seems to respond better to better structured prompts than when you don't structure prompts. I think that that's becoming less and less true over time, because I do think that AI is starting to kind of suss out intent a little bit. So it's helping out in that space, but I still think the power users are using very thoughtful prompts, and in a way, and in fact, that's what's when I listen to Saul Kahn's book about AI, like it sounded like when he was talking about their engineers working on Conmigo, that it was both a mix of there is some post or some fine tuning of models that you can do that help adjust the responses, but some of this is also prompting, and the master prompt that they utilize for
the super prompt. And so something that's happened since our last show is that I facilitated the first Monday of the month webinar for the Media Education Lab, and it was about SIFT and the super prompt, and it really was a great session. Unfortunately, it didn't get recorded. It's the first time I've failed to do that. We had, and it was my fault, but like it is weird to be in a Zoom call with all these AI agents, and I think what happened was one of them was saying, announcing that it was recording or whatever, and I heard, oh, somebody else has turned on recording. But anyway, we're doing that again. It's one of my Geeks of the Week. It's coming up on the 17th. But if you haven't used Mike Caulfield's super prompt to apply the SIFT web literacy strategy, what I actually want to do, and this will be after Thanksgiving, is I've got to do my unit on Fruit Loop conspiracies and the moon landings, and I've done that. It's stretched out so long, and I've been doing it for 6 years or something like that. But like being able, I want to take his prompt and make it a little more middle school appropriate. But it is incredible to take someone's 600 line prompt, or I don't remember how long it is, hundreds and hundreds of lines, and then have a very sophisticated output that you can use in this case to fact check things. And so, 100%. I think that prompt engineering and the uses of prompts, I think there's a lot of teachers that are not playing with these tools yet. And the pace of change with them is just incredible. And you can be sure that many, many students are using these tools in different ways, and it may or may not be helping them be better thinkers. I'm not going to say that the whole sky is falling, but I am going to say that, man, we can't afford to ignore this, because, I've talked to high school students that say they're not doing any more writing at home because the teachers just think that they'll be cheating if they give them an at-home writing assignment. And boy, I think we really have to be careful how we respond to these tools. And part of responding well also involves using the tools to understand if you're making an appropriate adjustment to your instruction and your learning in your classroom.
Yeah, and I will also say, in part because I did speak to a couple groups of teachers today about Gemini, and I wish that we had better answers in this right now, but we don't, which is that AI's existence, pure existence, does call into question otherwise research driven strategies inside of a classroom, right?
Yeah.
If we can't surveil our students 24 hours a day, of which we can't, and nor should we seek to, because that has its own extraordinary risks in the other direction, that we have to spend more time thinking about what to do next. And I get, and I know of a lot of schools that banning internet, banning devices inside the classroom.
Banning the internet?
Well, or discouraging its open use during assignment time, right?
Yeah, sure.
And I get that, right? And I know Blue Books have made a return in a lot of classrooms as well, and not the least of which is higher ed itself. But it's just not sustainable in the long term,
Yeah.
right?
And if we're going to prepare folks to enter the workforce, we are not sending kids into a workforce that's a blue book workforce. Okay,
Yes.
we're not just here. Can you write this in cursive? In fact, I had to read some comments that one of my students received from a teacher that was in cursive. But, they don't write cursive now, and they're not going to be expected to in the workplace. All right, to go back to your question about Google, here's the Google blog article from November 6th. It's titled AI and Learning, a New Chapter for Students and Educators. And there's some really good links in here that I've also included in the show notes, like tools that they have for YouTube, which that was back from December of 2024. But I've seen some of those when I've been in my own YouTube studio, but a number of different AI tools on the YouTube platform. That's where I got that link to the student page for Notebook LM, the enhancements they've done to Google Classroom. Overall, this post is basically just saying, hey, we at Google, and then they say it explicitly, we believe AI can really help. They cite the statistic that by 2030, the world's going to need 44 million more teachers, and that puts a strain on our systems. Quote, but we believe AI can help. And while that is true, the philosophy here may not necessarily be shared by a lot of teachers. I don't know who's doing this research, but I would hypothesize that a high percentage of teachers, particularly secondary teachers teaching, let's say, English, language arts, have a very hostile view on AI in general because it is so disruptively threatening to the traditional pedagogy that we've had in English class. So this article it did point to a number of tools that Google has developed and has customized, but it's what we've been talking about where it's not, Notebook LM is a different tool to go to, but it's integration within YouTube. It's integration within Google Classroom.
Yep.
And that is sort of the phase. I don't know if you've seen a framework for that, but it's like maybe early adopter, AI, like go out to the tool and use the tool, and it's separate. And then sort of this next generation is integrated right with you. You're in Gmail and there's your, AI summary of the thread, or here's the suggested text for your reply or whatever. And so you don't have to go out and use a separate tool. It's just built right in. And then that's what we're seeing with Canva as well. And by the way, I hadn't seen the whole thing yet, but if you haven't seen that Canva 2.0 keynote, it's like an hour and a half long, but there's 7 different tools. Canva wants to be our new operating system. And the power of Canva is phenomenal. I would absolutely say it is the most powerful design environment that I introduce my students to, more so than the Google world. Google world is powerful too, and we focus on that a lot as a Google App School. But if there's one tool I was going to share with kids and a person of any age, it would be Canva. And shout out to my friend Cindy Danner-Kuhn, who tried for years to get me to use Canva when I was like, what do you mean? I got Google Draw. I don't need no Canva. Oh my gosh, it's incredible what you can do.
It really is. And the other thing I would say too is that it has revolutionized graphic design for me, in part because, and then you start to mix like Canva AI, right? Like it's okay. And if I were in a school right now, they're willing to sign data privacy agreements, and so it's a really easy way to give your students access to AI is to go through the Canva AI suite, which is free for all K-12 schools, all teachers, all students. So it's pretty great. But that all said, the way I use it is as kind of a platform to modify things that I'm creating elsewhere or getting advice from elsewhere. And I've had the real pleasure the last couple of months to work on things like unified slideshow themes for our organization. And we wanted one that really leaned into the Frontier Learning Lab. And so we created a Google slide theme called Frontier Flow, and we used some large language models to kind of help us ideate it. And then we actually created a process to extract what we called the visual DNA out of an image. And so we had our logo, and we had a topo map that we kind of mixed together into with a prompt that helped us find color schemes and language around how we might want to design the slides, and made an absolutely beautiful slide template. And that was something that I just couldn't have pulled off by myself. I'm a pretty good snob when it comes to graphic design, but being able to do some of the tougher things there just required clicking skills I did not have. And Canva is really responsible for a lot of that the power that I have in my hands now.
Absolutely. Your toolkit's been expanded. I dropped the link to the YouTube AI enhancements from December 2024. And then I just dropped the link to another Google blog post that came from that AI and learning post, which is called Guided Learning in Gemini from Answers to Understanding. Basically, and I subscribed to Conmigo for a few months and dropped it. I think it's like the Conmigo philosophy, but it's just built into Gemini. Okay,
Yep.
so that you can do the same kind of guided learning. You want to cover that automated tasks, Gemini, about the agent?
Yeah, I just heard this today, and it was on the way. I did training in a small Montana town just outside of Great Falls called Belt. And so I had a 10-minute drive, actually it's closer to a 15-minute drive, where I had a couple of videos that queued up so that I listened to on the way there. And Rob, the AI guy, is reporting that there's a new phenomenon that's called Google Workspace Flows, which is a new agentic feature inside of Gemini. And from what I'm able to tell is that it's available now in certain workplace editions, almost certainly not for the education one for a while yet, just because things tend to end up there last. But it is wild what this can do, not the least of which is you can start to create agents inside of Google Workspace that do really fantastic things for you. And as an example of this is it can be constantly looking at your email, for example, and in the morning when you go to open your email up, it might auto tag it, or it might highlight for you which ones need immediate attention. It might list ones as priority if it has something that has a timely response to it, or and that's just, imagine across the entire Google Workspace architecture and all the work you can do inside of it. You can imagine really quickly if you have an agentic system, a formula-based agentic system, how quickly you could create some pretty extraordinary stuff.
I'm going to play with that. One of the things that Google has a huge, huge advantage over OpenAI and everybody else is the fact that so many of us are using their tools and their platforms, and they have millions of people already using these kinds of tools. I am always interested when I run into roadblocks doing things. And tonight was an example. I have a custom GPT that I call a social post formatter, and it puts the link in the format. But like it said, according to our policies, I can't go live to that ZDNet or that Ars Technica article because I'm prohibited from visiting the page. And I regularly have arguments with ChatGPT about like use your live search capabilities and go out and do this. And sometimes they'll say, well, I can't do it. I'll say, well, you just did it from here. Well, you're right. It's just weird, the guardrails and things that are being put in place. So I think Google has a tremendous, tremendous advantage because so many folks are Gmail users and already use Google. And I'll say as an aside, I need to figure out how to help kids cite an AI overview. I've been trying to have them go to the site, which the AI overview references, but I'm like, hey, this is the first year we've had AI overviews because we've used bibliographic citation tools like ZBib to create MLA formatted citations. And anyway, when they're trying to cite the AI overview, I'm like, I'm not sure MLA's caught up with that. Maybe they have. Maybe it's out there.
Yeah, totally. And the citation thing's even complicated too, right? In part because, like, obviously, we want to continue the general practice of citations for anything, but like unless our kids are saving that, those the sources are fleeting, so you can't even check on them, right? And go ahead.
I've taught. I mean, I think we have so missed the boat with hyperlinked writing. I feel like, I mean, this is the reverse of what we're talking about with blue book writing and handwriting now in class and whatever. But like, I feel like we should be extensively hyperlinking the writing that we're doing in school. And I think that we also, as a best practice, ought to be keeping a log of our AI interactions. And that should just be part of the attribution that we turn in, for instance, for an assignment. Here was the dialogue that I kept with Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever my tool was. And wouldn't that be interesting, Jason? Maybe we could do research on this. If you had a class of students that did that, the teacher could not only analyze the paper that is produced or whatever media is produced, but then also analyze the chat log and bring that in and think about the ways in which the student used prompting or didn't use prompting and the techniques that they used. I mean, the power of analysis to take a lot of information, whether it's structured or unstructured, and then be able to make sense of it and process it. There's some really interesting possibilities here, but unfortunately, I think what we see at least a few folks doing, maybe a lot of folks, I don't know, is just saying, hey, don't use any of these tools in my room. We're going to pretend like it's 1955.
Yeah, that's exactly the case.
Okay, we got a time for a few more, so we got 15 minutes.
I didn't throw any of these other in here.
It's okay, I can choose them if you want or whatever.
New ChatGPT 5.1 is out today.
Yeah, so this is interesting. The article I dropped in is an Ars Technica, and it says OpenAI walks a tricky tightrope with ChatGPT's 5.1, 8 new personalities. As we've talked about on the show, a very valid criticism of ChatGPT and other AIs has been the sycophantic. Look, I said it right because I could read it. The sycophantic nature of these, in other words, really overly praising you and just not really being any kind of objective, assistant or something like that. And so there have been lawsuits over, suicides, and there's just been a lot of things. Well, now this is interesting. Tonight, you can have it auto select which model, and there is an instant model, which is going to, as the name implies, be faster, and a thinking model. But the thinking model as well has two different modes, and so this goes back to, because the thinking modes are either standard or extended. Huge difference in using the Mike Caulfield SIFT prompt when you're just using an instant mode. He recommends, actually, and I don't read him every day. He's very prolific, especially on his Substack, but he recommended Claude instead of ChatGPT and the paid version of Claude. But anyway, we had folks in this webinar doing, some live, super prompt, practice sessions or whatever, chat sessions. And so it's just very interesting the differences in results when you choose these quote thinking models, versus the standard models. But so now there's 8 different personalities that you can choose. And so you can have it be professional or friendly or candid or quirky or efficient or cynical and nerdy, along with the default setting. And this kind of reminds me, I have not played with it for a while, but like School AI and some other tools, to me, basically just seemed like they were prompting templates, and like you might be able to do those same things on your own if you just knew about the prompts. And so sort of like with image generation, right? What was the image generator, Midjourney, that you subscribe to a lot? And then what was that other one that I paid for a while? Ideogram, that's right. And for the record, not paying for that now. Yeah. And I've been using Gemini a little bit. ChatGPT is still 5, really, really amazing. But you could say in the style of an oil painting, or I really like to say in the style of a comic or cartoon, And so I guess maybe they've done a little more guardrails in there about, I don't even know that it's guardrails. It's just like, training to say, here, you can have these different personalities. It's interesting to me from a UI standpoint. just like Google with the omnibar and the search, right? Remember Yahoo search? It was a
Yeah.
category search. It wasn't just this open bar. Google was revolutionary. It's like it's just a white space in the search bar. And what are you going to do? And that's
Yep.
what these chatbots are as well, to be approachable and just say, hey, just talk to me and type whatever you want. But being able to know some of these different tips and tricks. Sort of like Alan November teaching about the Alta Vista search engine back in the day, and even like with Gmail, it can be like, use this syntax of, cite colon or, search your Google Drive. And anyway, there are these codes and scripts, but it's designed not to be for coders, for people to just be able to use plain language. So they mentioned in the article that because of all the lawsuits and everything, OpenAI seems a little less able to say, hey, look at this, it's faster and it's better, come and get it. But they're claiming that they have minimized some of this sycophantic behavior. And, of course, it's faster, it's better. But to me, it's just fascinating that you can choose whether you want a thinking model or not, right? Can you imagine that in a classroom? Kids come in, you're like, okay, guys, today we're going to be defaulting to the instant model. No thinking required. I mean, it's like, why would I not want you to use a thinking model? And I get that you want a fast result. And it is a little odd because as I interact, again, primarily with ChatGPT, I've certainly noticed that I'm not getting the results as quickly, but I'm getting a lot better results. And I would rather wait a few seconds and get something really good than, just get something that comes out immediately and is not accurate or, but that's not to say I don't still deal with hallucinations. I do that all the time too. So it's,
yeah. And I still can't help but to think that, a year or 2 or 5 or 10 from now, that probably there will be a lot less talk about this model versus that model, right? But it's right now it does matter, right? And even though we don't talk about it a whole lot, like in the big picture of EdTech, like there are models that are as effective and much more inexpensive to run than ChatGPT or Claude. Most of them come from other countries, which I think for some people might introduce some risk, but it remains highly complicated. And when I was talking to teachers today, and I said, and at some point this stuff might just be baked into whatever you're doing, but for right now, your best chance of literacy is to go to the model directly. Don't go to something built on top of the model. Do it yourself, right? Because it's going to give you a sense of place and a sense of engagement that I think helps you to start developing some critical literacies around what AI can do and can't do.
And on that note, here's the ZDNet article from November 7th. A new Chinese AI model claims to outperform ChatGPT 5 and Sonnet 4.5, and it's free. And so it strikes me that there are some analogies here to languages, right? I mean, I lived in Mexico City for a year after I got out of college, and I've traveled, but like you can be in another country and not speak their language at all, but especially if you're going to live there, like it really makes sense to learn some of the language and to use some of the language. I think that's an analogy to use today for teaching and learning in the AI era, is like if you are a complete Luddite and you refuse to have anything to do with these tools, it's like you're saying you're just riding your horse and you're not going to do anything with these cars. Or you're living in Mexico and you're like, I'm not going to speak any Spanish. Well, you can do that, but you're not going to be nearly as effective in navigating your way through that culture. And especially if you want to help other people learn how to effectively live and thrive and make good choices and just be a citizen and a good human, like I think it's important to know the language. So that's my little rant about why we should be playing with these AI tools. What would you say about the non-main platform ones? Like you've done a lot of playing. So is there a Chinese model that you've used, or what?
Yeah,
Really caught your attention?
there's a couple that are truly excellent. I would never talk DeepSeek about international politics, right? But does a pretty good job of analyzing text and coding. My understanding, from what I read, it does a pretty good job of. I've also used it before to like write Obsidian Vault templates for me, and it does a pretty solid job of that. The Z AI models apparently were released a couple weeks ago, are apparently as competitive with ChatGPT and some of its competitors. The Llama models have fallen behind.
That's the Meta Facebook, right?
Right, that's correct. And the Llama 4 models were a huge disappointment for a lot of folks. In part because there's a perception that they actually tweak them to specifically show up higher on the LM Arena rankings. So that do with that with what you will. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting models. The Quen models are my understanding really great at coding, and I've also utilized them in context of practice with. Like playing with open source models through OpenRouter. The new Kimi model out of China is, and I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing
What's it called? What was that one? That last one?
Kimi, Kimi. It has a thinking model out that's pretty solid. And if you go to LM Arena, the top 10 models, none of which are Llama based, like all of these models are within 16 points of each other on the LM Arena scoreboard. And that tells you something really significant, which is that most of these models are pretty darn solid. And if you're using Ernie's another one, I think that's Baidu's model. If you're using these models, and it's really important to talk about, and this gets confused a lot. In fact, I heard a speaker last week that I think incorrectly said that never use DeepSeek. Well, don't use the DeepSeek app, right? Like, because it asks for a bunch of permissions and it tracks you and yada yada yada. And going to DeepSeek AI and using that model like you would with private information, I wouldn't do either, because it exists in a country that doesn't have data privacy protections as much as, for example, the EU. But the model itself can be downloaded and is offered by tons of providers in the United States, where there's no risk there from the international intrigue standpoint. I've also really loved Le Chat from Mistral, the French company. They offer a $60 year-long account for educators that if I were only going to buy one account, or I only had the money to buy one account and I could afford the $5 a month to do it, that would be what I'd pick, because it's really great and it has ChatGPT-like features at a fraction of the cost. And so, that all plays into, this somewhat complicated marketplace.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will say you will be hard challenged to find other people that can rattle off that many different not ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, AI tools that he's familiar with. We got just a few more minutes. Let me do one or two, and then we'll do our geeks of the week. This was really interesting with the Internet Archive. I don't think this wasn't from last week, so we couldn't talk about this. The FBI is trying to unmask the registrar behind archive.today. I frequently use archive.ph, which is part of that same web property. And it's just fascinating that it reminds me of what the creator of Bitcoin still a secret. We don't know who that was. Or no, not Bitcoin. It was like the blockchain, right? The person who came up with the blockchain is this enigmatic mystery person. And so anyway, the website archive.today or archive.ph will create a paywall clear version of many pages. It won't do every website, but the FBI is wanting to crack down, and so they are trying to require the registrar to release that information. I thought that was pretty interesting. And then let's see. We haven't talked about CRISPR or anything like that in a while. This is in the miscellaneous category, but SciTech Daily reports that scientists are now reviving this ancient human gene that could help cure gout. And so by using CRISPR, scientists at Georgia State University are restoring an ancient enzyme that we lost millions of years ago, and that is going to potentially reverse the buildup of uric acid that causes gout. So anyway, that's biotech, and we're not a mainly biotech show, but we mention that kind of stuff. And it's another place where technology, and in this case, the merger of information technology with biotech and medicine, it's leading to some interesting things. So,
well, you mentioned Google and protein folding earlier, but one of the things that I think it's really important, there is a kind of a predilection of folks that are strongly anti-AI to group AI in one big master robot disaster. But the bottom line is that it will bring significant human benefits, right? Like whether or not we decide that the generative AI component, especially as it relates to creative works and learning, we need to continue to debate that, but it will bring, I think, some pretty stunning evolutions in science.
Absolutely. All right, sir. Well, we have done it again. We've actually talked for an hour, so shocking. I'm sure the world is amazed.
Well, Dr. Fryer, would you please share your Geeks of the Week?
Okay, well, I'll try not to talk about it too long. We are experiencing Mars tonight, folks, for the first time. No, I'm not talking about the planet. I'm actually just linking Jason's Thunderbird Geek of the Week. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. Mars is multi-aspect ratio streaming. And I will tell you that as I logged into StreamYard today and set up our call, I saw, oh my gosh, we can do this. So we're actually creating two different versions of the stream to YouTube. One is a vertical video, mobile, optimized, and then we've got the regular landscape version. And all paid StreamYard accounts, as ours is, can do that, and that'll be kind of cool. So give us some feedback. If you're seeing the show, are you seeing it on mobile, or are you seeing it on the typical desktop where we're side by side? Because the mobile versions got me on top and Jason below, and the desktop versions got me on the left and Jason on the right. I put this article in not because I want to politicize our show, but this is a great example of a hyperlinked article. This is something I found, I think, on either Mastodon or Blue Sky, and it was called "I Want You to Understand Chicago." It was from the 8th, and just the number of articles about what's happening in Chicago right now with respect to ICE and immigration enforcement. But it's an incredible article with links, and I mentioned that tonight. Hey, we need to be teaching our students how to hyperlink their writing, and that's a great example of that. I wrote a post a while back. I guess maybe I did mention it, but it's on reclaiming our news feeds. I really think that we need to work on creating our own lists of trusted voices, folks that we follow. If you're not on Substack, what are you doing with your time online? Get on Substack. And then I've mentioned that we're going to do a repeat of this super prompt webinar, and it's going to be coming up on Monday, the 17th of November, and it's called AI Super Prompts and the Anxious Generation. So we're going to specifically be showing how that super prompt can be used to fact check Jonathan Haidt and his claims of causality of cell phones being the root cause of all evil for teenagers today. And so anyway, that's coming up, and we invite people to join in. How about you, Dr. Neifer? Please don't feel like you need to share more than one, because it's really supposed to be the Geek of the Week.
Well, yeah, and I just have one for you tonight. So the thing I wanted to share is actually a really I kind of and somehow I'm in last week's. That's really weird. Okay, here I am. I like to think about a lot of roll your own tools, right? In part because, especially for the geeky among you, not that would include Dr. Farner and I, but the geeky among us, that, I think there's some utility in, figuring out how these tools work in the back end. And so I'm not saying that, the average teacher that really needs to spend their time focusing on the classroom, that this is not something that I would advise doing as a permanent solution or solution. But if you wanted to add AI into email, for example, like, yes, there's all these really extraordinary tools that are starting to evolve. There's third-party tools for sure, but you can also do some really amazing things by just kind of rolling your own tool. And so I did mention Thunderbird as an alternative email client. The reason why I use Thunderbird occasionally, and it's installed on every desktop machine that I use. In fact, I've even installed it via Linux on Chromebooks. The reason why I do this is because it allows you to sort in a way that helps me get through my inbox a little easier. And it plugs right into Gmail accounts. It plugs right into Outlook accounts. So it's a really great email client, but it has a very robust plugin system. And so one of the things that I have figured out is that if you have an API key to something like ChatGPT, we've talked about this in the past, that it is kind of a power user. It's like buying OpenAI access in bulk, like a Costco, and getting a significant discount, assuming you can keep your usage reasonable. But if you have an OpenAI API key or one of another provider, you can download that's something that's called Thunder AI, and it provides an AI tool set inside of Thunderbird that will do things like look at your emails for tone, revise your emails. It has an auto tagging feature where you can ask it to tag all of your morning emails, so it will attempt to determine if emails need to be attempt if your emails need to be read immediately or not. You can set it up all sorts of different ways. And it's yet another option here. And so, again, I'm not recommending this as this is the way to have AI manage your email. There's better tools for that. But if you want to experiment, that's a way to do that.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, Dr. Fryer, where can people find you on the interwebs?
I am at westfryer.com, and I've got lots of links there. How about you?
I am at aicentrist.com. But hey, this is the EdTech Situation Room, where once a week podcast most Wednesday nights when other events do not intervene. You can find us here on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, sometime in the middle of the night UTC. We hope that you'll join us live, but if you don't, you can always find us on the YouTubes, where all of our episodes are cataloged.
And Substack, baby. Substack and Spotify. We're all updated. We're all updated now. Finally.
And all available to you across finer broadcast channels for digital something. I'm really
podcaster. You're podcaster.
I'm digging myself into a hole here. Hey, stay safe, stay savvy. We hope to see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.
Good night, everybody.